Okay, I think we'll get started. Hopefully it's 1:25. I guess we'll wait a few more minutes, Tara, for people to come back. Looks like we might be all back again, Tara. Are we missing anyone?
No, it looks like we're all here.
Okay, great. If you don't mind, go ahead.
All right, so this is agenda item 9E, animal physical rehabilitation. So this agenda item follows up on the board's responses to public comment expressing objections to and recommendations on the animal physical rehabilitation rulemaking. Although the Administrative Procedure Act only requires the board to respond to public comment received during the 45-day public comment period that was completed on April 27, 2020, the board continued to receive public comment on the board's action on the proposed rulemaking. Before you today are revised responses to the objections and recommendations received by the board up to, during, and after the August 13, 2020 hearing. Accordingly, these revised responses are intended to provide the most complete responses to all public objections and recommendations to the rulemaking. Beginning on page 4 of the APR memo included in the board meeting materials, I will summarize the objections raised and proposed board responses. First, so on page 4, the California Association of Animal Physical Therapists and the Animal Physical Therapy Coalition contend that Business and Professions Code Section 4826 does not authorize licensed veterinarians to practice physical therapy or provide physical therapy modalities to animal patients. The proposed board response on pages 4 through 6 discusses that the Veterinary Medicine Practice Act is the body of law that authorizes veterinary medical treatment on animals and cites to the California State Legislature's own interpretation of the Practice Act that only licensed veterinarians or individuals performing under the supervision of a veterinarian can perform treatment on animals, and treatment includes physical therapy. Next, on page 6, Opponents allege that the proposed APR regulation fails to comply with the consistency requirement in the Administrative Procedure Act and improperly attempts to enlarge the scope of the Practice Act. The proposed board response discusses how the APR proposal is consistent with the existing scope of the Practice Act and the California State Legislature's interpretation thereof and supporting regulations. On pages 7 through 8, the next objection claims that once the veterinarian has established a VCPR, the veterinarian has sufficient knowledge of the animal to provide relevant information to a physical therapist with advanced certification in APR and then provide indirect supervision of the physical therapist who would perform APR services at an APR premises regulated by the board. Opponents assert that direct supervision over the physical therapist is unnecessary. The proposed board response on pages 8 through 9 discusses how the Practice Act and supporting regulations operate to require direct supervision over the performance of APR by an individual not licensed or registered by this board, and the differences in human physical therapy referrals from physicians and how that referral system does not apply to the treatment of animal patients. The next objection on page 9 asserts that this proposal will force existing APR practices to close and have a severe adverse impact on physical therapists providing APR. This objection alleges the proposal is an attempt by the veterinary profession to monopolize APR services and is an unlawful attempt to restrain trade in violation of antitrust laws. The proposed board response on pages 10 through 11 discusses how the California State Legislature established and subsequently interpreted the current statutory limitations on the performance of APR by individuals not licensed or registered by this board. Specifically, the proposed response discusses how the legislature has affirmatively expressed that performing physical therapy on an animal patient is included in the practice of veterinary medicine provided under the Practice Act, and that a physical therapist who wants to perform physical therapy on an animal patient must pursue additional licensure as a veterinarian, pursue registration as an RVT, or work under the direct supervision of a licensed veterinarian as a veterinary assistant. Consequently, an APR practice complying with existing laws and the California State Legislature's express interpretation of those laws would not have to close, and this proposal does not change that. The next objection on page 11 asserts that the public will not be protected and the public interest will not be served by the proposed regulation. The proposed board response on pages 11 through 13 discusses the increased use of physical therapy treatment on animals, the dangers to animal patients receiving APR without veterinarian supervision, the lack of clarity in existing law regarding APR, and the need to provide clarity of those laws to benefit the public and practitioners. The proposed response also provides the regulatory history of the development of veterinarian supervision requirements for RVTs and veterinary assistants, and setting the supervision requirements at the appropriate level to ensure animal patient safety. The next objection on pages 11 through 13 through 14. The next objection asserts that the proposed regulation does not ensure competency in the performance of APR, and APR requires highly trained, qualified, and skilled physical therapists who are the best possible providers of this specialized service. The proposed board response on pages 14 through 15 discusses veterinarian education, the statutory limitations of the Practice Act to board licensed veterinarians and individuals supervised by licensed veterinarians, and the board's statutory limitations on creating education and experience requirements for physical therapists. This concludes the objections to the APR proposal. Are there any questions about the objection responses? Kathy Bowler?
Thank you very much. I thought they were very thorough and well written. I did have one question and about a word on, it's on page 9. It's the response on number 3. Oh, wait, no. Yeah, I guess it's still number 3. It says at the board's August 13th meeting at 2020, it's that second paragraph from the top on, there you go, on page 9. Supporters of the bill stress. Do you mean the reg, or do you mean, I didn't know what bill it was.
The bill is
it
AB 3013.
So it's that bill they were talking. Okay, got it. Thank you. That was my question.
I had a question.
Hold on a sec. I just want to.
Actually, I don't think it is, Tara. I think it's supporters of the reg, it sounds like.
Yeah, that's what I think she's referring to.
Yeah.
Let's change that, the bill, to proposal.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies it.
Thank you. Dr. Nunez?
On the point number 4 that spoke about forced physical therapy practices to close, and also saying that physical therapy is being monopolized by the veterinary profession. The response does address how it's not forcing physical therapy to close, but in regards to the monopoly point, isn't there direct language that says that we can monopolize the practice of veterinary medicine because it would be in the consumer's protection, but if we're going to monopolize it, we have to have certain bodies that make sure that we're properly trained to provide that service. So I don't think the monopolization we have to. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I think it was Chief Justice Scalia, the time I ever agreed with him, he said that he wants brain surgeons to do brain surgery, and so he would be in favor of them monopolizing that field because it's in the interest of the consumer. Remember that argument? It was during the North Carolina thing.
So my response effectively tracks the North Carolina case insofar as what a board is required to do when enacting new regulations for a profession. So I'm not heavy-handed on how the veterinarians can monopolize. I don't think that argument is necessary here. What's important is that the California State Legislature is the body that has enacted legislation that provides veterinarians, I guess. Yeah,
it was in that original memo that you wrote where you actually quoted the Sherman Antitrust Act, and you actually quoted a case that occurred in the 1800s, believe it or not. And you said that although there are federal antitrust acts, the states have the authority to basically have an exemption to that as they set up their regulatory bodies to control these deals. And since we have the Department of Consumer Affairs that's basically controlling this whole field of veterinary medicine, I don't think it's antitrust at all. We fall under that exemption. The state has the authority to do.
So I'm not recommending that discussion in your responses per se. It is part of the rulemaking insofar as it's part of the meeting materials on this agenda item through the APR review process. As far as these objections are concerned, I'm making sure that they're tight and appropriate and address the allegations sufficient to defend the board in this rulemaking. So ultimately, it's about ensuring that the board is doing appropriate regulation under what the state legislature has authorized it to do. Yeah. Separately, there's an argument to be made that DCA is the reviewing body. Yes. And I just don't think that's necessary here, because ultimately, at the end of the day, it's the California state legislature that has authorized the board to take action wholly outside of the rulemaking review process.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just have heard that accusation of monopolization and violation of antitrust laws thrown out a lot in opposition responses. So, but you're saying that it's covered elsewhere legislatively as opposed to in regulations. Okay. I get that.
Any other clarification or discussion before someone would entertain a motion here?
We're still moving through the responses, so I don't need a motion just yet. I just want to finish up with the opposition or objection responses.
Why don't you go ahead and keep moving then?
Okay. Beginning on page 15 of the APR memo, I will summarize the alternatives proposed in the public comments received by the board and the proposed board determinations and explanations regarding those alternatives. The first proposed alternative on pages 15 through 16 is to implement the board's task force recommendation instead of the proposed APR regulation. Specifically, opponents recommend the board utilize the task force's indirect supervision model to allow licensed physical therapists to practice on their own premises under veterinarian direction and referral of the animal patient for APR. The proposed board response on pages 16 through 17 would reject this recommendation and discusses the board's lack of statutory authority to create education and experience requirements for physical therapists who want to perform APR and APR premises license requirements and enforcement capabilities. The next proposed alternative on page 17 is to follow what other states have done to establish APR and statute, create a model for indirect supervision, and provide for collaboration between license groups. The proposed board response would reject this recommendation and discusses the reasons why the board does not propose scope of practice legislation. Another alternative on page 18 is to utilize a human medical physical therapy model that would allow the animal patient to be referred to the physical therapist to prepare a treatment plan and perform APR under indirect veterinarian supervision. The proposed board response on pages 18 through 20 would reject this recommendation and discusses why the human medical referral model cannot be accomplished under the Practice Act and its supporting regulations. Another recommendation on page 20 requested the proposal specifically exclude wildlife rehabilitation of animals regulated by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The proposed board response on page 21 would accept this recommendation and modify the proposal to include this exclusion for wildlife rehabilitation. Another recommendation on page 21 requested the proposal provide different guidelines for small and large animals to accommodate the different needs of small animals at a veterinary premises and large animals at a rehabilitation facility. The proposed board response on pages 21 through 24 would reject the request to craft different guidelines for small and large animals, but would modify the proposal to eliminate the range setting provision and instead rely on the current definition of direct supervision, which means the supervisor is physically present at the location where animal health care job tasks are to be performed and is quickly and easily available. So the board is asked to consider and approve proposed responses to written and oral comments received on the APR proposal for inclusion in the board's final statement of reasons. Separately, you're asked to discuss the proposed modifications to the regulatory text to address wildlife rehabilitation and APR performed on large animals. I do have a modified text proposal if you would like to review that, but the proposed revisions are included in the memo itself. Just let me know if you need to see the full modified text.
So can I make a motion to approve the proposed responses?
Yes.
And yes. That's the one, we'll just start with that.
Okay, so it's a motion to approve the board's responses as revised to make Ms. Fuller's edit.
Yes.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Ms. Laredo seconding.
So now we can open it up for more board discussion, and then we'll ask for input from the public as well. Any more board discussion on these responses? Kathy?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, and I'm not wedded to this, but if it might, and I hate tinkering, this were so well written and well researched, Tara. Thank you so much. On page 18, which is the response to the human medical physical therapy model, and again, I think it just gets more to some of the reasoning behind. We're on your first paragraph under the proposed response, and this is at near the top of 18. Okay. The very last sentence, if the physical therapist is not well versed in potential complications and side effects of APR for a specific animal patient, I'm wondering if somewhere we could add in or other ongoing health conditions of the patient in that. So it's not necessarily always the complications or the side effects, it's the other health conditions that patient may have that may affect things. I don't mean to make this too complicated, but it was just something I thought of.
I think you brought that up before too, Kathy. It's a very valid point. It's oftentimes not just the complications and side effects of the APR, it's underlying health conditions that might not be obvious. I like that.
Okay, so the proposal would be revised on page 18, second paragraph under item 3 in the last line. It would instead read potential complications and side effects of APR or other underlying medical conditions of the specific animal patient.
Do I have to re-motion to include that?
Do you accept that revision to your motion?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo, can you second that revision?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, any other comments or revisions from the board? Okay, moderator, would you please open up for public comment?
All right, this is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I have opened up the Q&A panel for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment, please click on that icon of a question mark within a square located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. We'll go ahead and get instructions up on the screen in just a second. All right, and I'll go ahead and pause a moment just to allow members of the public adequate time in order to access that Q&A panel. All right, this is the moderator. It looks like at this time there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you.
All right, Q&A panel is now closed.
Okay, any further discussion by members of the board? Okay, call for the vote.
Ms. Fuller?
Aye.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Dr. Nunez?
Abstain.
Ms. Prado?
I'm going to abstain.
Dr. Solacito?
Yes.
Ms. Yanis is absent. Dr. Nolan?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, we're moving on then to, what are we on, 9F? Yes, 9F.
Tara, you have modified text for your consideration on the APR proposal. If you want to revise the proposal, I need somebody to make a motion that is included on page 24 of the memo to approve the proposed modified text for a 15-day comment period, and if there are no adverse comments received during the 15-day public comment period, delegate to the executive officer the authority to adopt the proposed regulatory changes as modified, and delegate to the executive officer the authority to make any technical or non-substantive changes that may be required in completing the rulemaking file. Would someone like to make that motion?
And you're referring to the wildlife, the wildlife changes, is that right?
I'm referring to wildlife and the striking of the range setting provision.
So we can do those together, is what you're saying? Okay. I would make that motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Kathy has seconded. Okay, so now any questions or concerns by the board on those modifications? Okay, moderator, would you open this up for public comment, please?
All right, this is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this, please click on that icon with a question mark within a square located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow members time to access that Q&A panel. All right, this is the moderator. Looks like at this time there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A feature?
Yes, thank you.
All right.
And since I see no other comments or hands up by the board, call for the vote.
Ms. Bowler,
Aye.
Dr. Bradbury,
Yes.
Ms. Laredo,
Yes.
Dr. Nunez,
You're muted, Mark.
Yes.
Ms. Prado,
Yes.
Dr. Solocito,
Yes.
Ms. Yanis is absent. Dr. Nolan,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, so I think now we're ready to move on to item 9F.
Yep, and turn it over to Justin.
Okay. So should I share my screen, Jessica?
Yes, please.
Okay. Hold on one second here. Okay.
This is the moderator. I'm just going to quickly interrupt real quick. Just as a reminder to members of the public, we're not going to be responding to raised hands. If you would like to make a comment during the public comment portions, please, you're going to have to type, please, I would like to make a public comment in that Q&A panel when it's open. So please be patient until the Q&A is open again.
So I'm sorry, members. I'm gonna interrupt. It appears that have people who wanted to make public comment during that agenda item, but were unable to do so. So I'm wondering for this agenda item to make sure that they are able to comment, that we do call on the people with the raised hands.
Okay, I can start doing that. Thank you.
So are we going to go back to agenda item 9E to just make sure that anyone who had a raised hand, well, it looks like the raised hand just vanished. I just want to make sure that the public had an opportunity to comment on 9E before we move on. It's just been, you know, a very discussed and contentious rulemaking package. I just want to make sure that we're thorough.
The raised hand looks like it's from DV Ayers, and that's an email I received that he's trying to make a public comment. So if we can unmute his mic to allow him an opportunity, I think that would be best.
Sure, let me unmute him now.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for your patience. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this item. I am GV Ayers of Gentle Rivers Consulting, representing the Animal Physical Therapy Coalition. Karen Atlas, the coalition president, whom you all know, is unable to attend this afternoon's meeting, so those remarks are also made on her behalf. The Animal Physical Therapy Coalition remains opposed to the current regulatory proposal, the one in 9E. The issue of animal physical rehabilitation needs a legislative solution rather than a board regulation. The board cannot adequately address this issue through regulations. The revised memorandum from Staff Counsel before you proposes a number of recommendations in response to objections to the proposed regulation. A basic argument throughout the memorandum is that the legislature has already decided the issue of animal physical rehabilitation and refers to the committee analysis of AB 3013 in 2018 and a sunset background paper to make its point. As a committee consultant with the Senate Business and Professions Committee from 1993 to 2014, I would caution you against such conclusions. Committee analyses are valuable and informative, but should not be interpreted as complete legislative determinations. The analysis is from one committee in one house of the legislature. It is a logical error to extrapolate declarations from such analyses to be a policy statement of the entire legislature. Using that same reasoning, one could argue that the Animal Physical Therapy Bill AB 3013 from 2018, is the policy of the legislature, since it was approved 9-0 by the only policy committee that heard it, the same one for which that analysis was prepared. It still remains that the Practice Act does not place animal physical rehabilitation or its modalities within the exclusive scope of the practice of veterinary medicine. For the board to seek to carve this out in regulation, it does so without legislative oversight or input. Because of the current pandemic, the board's sunset review was delayed until 2021. The Animal Physical Therapy Coalition urges the board to delay any action on this issue until it is fully considered under sunset review and a legislative remedy is made. The proposed regulation fails to recognize the real ability of a licensed physical therapist with advanced education and training in animal physical therapy to safely perform animal rehabilitation. The board has not to date answered all of the substantive issues raised by the questions from the Animal Physical Therapy Coalition in the board's summary of proposed responses, and we would ask when or if they will be answered. The actions of the Veterinary Medical Board in pursuing the current regulation illustrates the proverb, if all you have is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. The board is only considering its hammer, the existing Veterinary Medicine Practice Act, and is using it to pound on the issue of animal physical therapy. The board is not considering the needed tool of legislation to address this issue in the Act. The board has failed to engage in any meaningful efforts to amend the law, which board members, board counsel, members of the legislature, and others have said is needed in order to adequately address the issue of animal physical rehabilitation. The issues are not insurmountable. They can be reasonably, adequately, and safely addressed in legislation. Thank you for your time.
Moderator, are there any other public comments?
This is the moderator. I've opened up the Q&A again for public comment, but it looks like there are no further requests. Would you like me to go ahead and close it? Apologies. I just got a request for comment.
Okay, and also if there are any hand raises, you can go ahead and try to open those up too.
All right. I would like to say to members of the public, I cannot lower your hand. You will have to lower that yourself. So if you no longer have a comment, please click that raise hand icon again to lower it. In the meantime, I will be unmuting Valerie Fensterm, who has requested public comment.
Hi, this is Valerie Fenstermaker. I just wanted to thank Tara, first of all, for all of her work on this. And I'd like to thank the board over the last 9 years for their work on this topic. I just also want to add that the California Veterinary Medical Association supports the proposed responses and, again, appreciates all of this work. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator, and it looks like there are no further requests for public comment. Would you like me to go ahead and close that Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you.
All right, and I will pass over the presenter role back over to Justin.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question. Do we have to say something, Tara, now that we've heard the public, because we voted before we had the public comment?
I have no idea. This is all new to me, the virtual webcast. So any recommendations, Tara or Jessica?
I would say that The agenda encourages members of the public to submit their written comments in case there are any technical difficulties. It seemed like we had a technical difficulty understanding that the public wanted to comment prior to your votes. We did open it up and finally received that public comment, albeit after the motion was already made. I would say that arguably the comments that were raised were covered in the memo, the substantive comments. I appreciate, there was some caution given to the board with respect to proceeding with the rulemaking. I guess about the only thing we could do really at this point would be to follow up if the members have any subsequent discussion they would like to add. If anyone wants to reopen the motion, you can. You can reopen the item and make another vote now that you've received the public comment again. I'm not saying that you have to do that because I think that largely the substantive issues that were raised have already been addressed in the memo that was voted on. So it's up to you at this point how you wish to proceed.
I do think that we did receive written comment all the way up until a few days ago that was substantially the same as Mr. Ayers' comments. So I'm comfortable just pressing on. Anyone else? Okay. Let's go ahead and turn it back over to Justin then.
Okay, thank you. And you can hear me? Yes, okay, perfect. Okay, so we're on agenda item 9F, and this pertains to the board's regulatory proposal regarding RVT emergency animal care. This regulation is being brought back to you because we have completed the 45-day comment period. There were a few comments received and another comment which is being brought to you for your consideration today. And then just some quick background. This proposal was originally approved by the board in October of 2017, was discussed further in 2018, and then reapproved by the board in May of 2018. This proposal would amend CCR 2069, emergency animal care. And again, the proposed amendments are discussed in more detail in the supporting documents, the notice, the ISR, and are also seen in the proposed language, all of which are attached. So the proposal made it through the initial review and approval period, approved by DCA director, approved by agency. It was published by OAL on June 5th. The 45-day comment period concluded on July 20th. And we received a total of 3 comments, 2 comments of support, which are attached. And then we received 1 comment with concerns. So all 3 comments are attached to the memo. And I will just briefly go over what the concerns were. They're outlined here on page 2 of the memo. The first bullet there are no definitions of the terms emergency and direct communication. 2, the proposal creates a legal bypass to the VCPR and any form of examination or consultation with a licensed veterinarian by giving the RVT the legal authority to perform an examination, establish a diagnosis, develop and implement a treatment plan, and prescribe controlled substances. Number 3, the proposal allows for the business model of an absentee veterinarian. 4th bullet, the consumer would be making a non-informed decision regarding treatment, including but not limited to pain management and euthanasia. 5th bullet, the proposal would pave the way for the following scenarios. At-home euthanasia services to send RVTs to perform euthanasia following communication with veterinarian. 2, at-home euthanasia services to have RVTs answering phones, and if unable to communicate with the veterinarian, the RVT goes out to perform the euthanasia in accordance with written protocols. Number 3, the National Home Euthanasia Services would be able to employ RVTs throughout the state instead of veterinarians to perform their services. And then the 4th bullet there, sub-bullet, physical therapy establishments could have an absentee veterinarian provided written protocols exist. Further, the public comment also asserted that an RVT should not have the ability to diagnose and prescribe. The consumer deserves the protection associated with services provided by a licensed veterinarian. Okay. So in response to these concerns, Board Counsel had prepared or has prepared a detailed 3-page response to all of these concerns. They're provided in the memo. Beginning on page, there we go. At the bottom of page 2 through page 5, and I believe the response adequately addresses the stated concerns. However, I'll probably let Tara chime in a bit as well, as she crafted this language. If the board approves the proposed response provided, staff will incorporate that language into the final statement of reasons and proceed with the final rulemaking packages. So I'll see if Tara, would you like to chime in or add anything else to this?
Not really, other than it seems to be, this might have been the second time I've heard a concern of new euthanasia at-home services being rendered by RVTs without veterinarian supervision. And the proposed response goes through that, and most importantly on page 4, it really talks about how a new business model with an absentee veterinarian couldn't really exist because under normal circumstances, a veterinarian has to have examined the animal patient before designating an animal health care task to an RVT. And the scenarios this rulemaking talks about, or rather clarifies, is emergency situations. So something must be done by someone now to relieve the animal from suffering, whether that's helping them or potentially euthanizing. So if a service was established with this business model of an absentee veterinarian, it would be, they would have to justify every single time an RVT went out on their own without any VCPR having been established previously by a veterinarian, such that the RVT did not otherwise require the necessary supervision under the regulations, and then they just rendered treatment. So every time it would have to be documented it was an emergency for them to take advantage of existing law and the clarifying revisions that this rulemaking makes. Otherwise, are there any questions about the rest of the response?
I thought that was a very big leap to say that it was going to pave the way for RVT euthanasia businesses. I agree. I don't see that connection at all, and I think the response is appropriate.
I just wanted to make some clarification. If this covers what happens in the shelters, where animals being brought in by the public potentially suffering, and it's an RVT that would make the assessment, in providing, let's say, euthanasia. I just am by just reading what we have here, I feel like it's now going to be requiring like veterinarians to be like on call 24/7. Yeah, I'm a little concerned because I think that, like, in an emergency situations, especially in the shelters, this is like very common for us to be encountering these situations.
Just so you know the background, it mostly came out of veterinary services that were being used at certain rodeos up and down the state where they're supposed to have a veterinarian available, but in some situations they could not have a veterinarian available. So it was somewhat expanding the authority of what the RVT could do at a rodeo. But those are good questions. I think those concerns that you have are covered under the minimum standards for shelter. Veterinarians, that's a little bit different, right?
Yeah, on page 5, the memo talks about an RVT administering sodium pentobarbital for euthanasia of animals by an RVT employed by an animal control shelter or its agencies or humane society, which is already authorized under Business and Professions Code Section 4827, Subdivision D. So I would say that the shelter situation's already covered under statute, and then this regulation would apply to other situations.
So it's not limited to administering a sodium pentobarbital. So basically limited to the euthanasia, because if there's a life-saving effort that can be extended by the RVT until a veterinarian can actually see the animal. So that does not, that is covered, that they can do that.
I think the key word is emergency, and that's what you're really talking about as well, Dr. Solicito. So under an emergency situation, then the RVT is allowed to perform life-saving measures. But, I mean, in fact, this just seems to me broadens the scope of the ability of an RVT to do that. It doesn't limit it more so.
But wouldn't it be placed in a situation where they're going to be questioned as to making a diagnosis by trying to, apply medication or treatment?
Sarah, maybe it would be helpful to put the wording up of the actual statute. Can we put the wording up?
Oh.
Justin, whoever's controlling me.
Yeah. Okay, I'm driving. Tara, which statute is it? Or?
Well, so Business and Professions Code Section 4840.5 lays out the emergency statute where an RVT may render such life-saving aid and treatment as may be prescribed under regulations adopted by the board. And that's what this does. Such emergency aid and treatment, if rendered to an animal patient not in the presence of a licensed veterinarian, may only be continued under the direction of a licensed veterinarian. So that statute was recently clarified in 2018, and so we needed to make changes in this regulation to better describe life-saving aid and treatment. But also, while this statute was going through the legislative process, the issues of rodeos was discussed, and the legislature told us to do something about the rodeo treatment. So there's no intent to affect shelters per se. If there is an emergency at a shelter, the RVT could render life-saving treatment or euthanize as necessary under the two different Business and Professions Code statutes. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, were there any other comments or questions? Okay, if not, then the action requested is stated here. The board is asked to consider and approve the proposed responses to the written comment received during the 45-day public comment period and direct staff to incorporate the responses into the FSR and proceed with the final rulemaking package.
So I think what Justin is asking for is a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Motion made by
Just said.
do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, seconded by Dr. Nunez. Any further discussion by the board or clarifications? So moderator, please open it up for public comment or questions.
All right, this is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I have opened up the Q&A panel for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment, please click on that icon of a question mark within a square located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. We'll get instructions up, and the instructions are there. Thank you, co-moderator. All right, so I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow members of the public time to access that Q&A panel. All right, this is the moderator. It looks like at this time there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to go ahead and close that Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you. So back then to the board. Don't see anyone. Diane, did you want to make a comment, or you're just, no? Okay, I don't see anyone else wanting to make a comment, so call for the vote.
Ms. Bowler? Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Dr. Nunez?
Yes.
Ms. Prado?
Yes.
Dr. Solocito?
Yes.
Ms. Yanis is absent. Dr. Nolan?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, so now moving along to 9G. Is that Justin again?
It is, yes.
Yes, it is.
Give me one moment. I'll pass over presenter role to you again.
Okay. So 9G. So this agenda item pertains to the board's drug compounding regulatory proposal. This proposal was originally approved by the board in October of 2017, but language was later revised and approved again by the board in October of 2019 and January of this year as well. This proposal would add CCR sections 2090 through 2095, which encompass the following regarding drug compounding: definitions, requirements, policies and procedures, expiration dates, labeling of compounded preparations, and quality assurance. This package was approved by the DCA director and agency in June of this year, published with OAL on July 17th. The public comment period closed on August 31st. And again, we received 3 comments on this proposal as well. 2 comments in support of the proposed language and 1 comment in support with recommendations. That comment with recommendations was received from the Animal Health Institute. All 3 comments are attached to the memo. So this item has been brought to your consideration to consider the proposed responses to these recommendations provided by AHI. These responses will be incorporated into the FSR and final rulemaking package. And additionally, in response to the recommendations, we also have some proposed modified text that we would like for you to consider. So those are the 2 objectives. So let me just first go over the comments, or the recommendations rather, and I'll just kind of briefly go through these. I believe there was about 7 recommendations. Again, AHI is in support of the regulatory proposal, but they did offer these recommendations. The first one is that AHI cautions the board against finalizing its regulations prior to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration finalizing guidance for industry number 256, draft GFI, as AHI believes the proposed regulations must be consistent with federal guidance regarding compounding from bulk drug substances. Okay. I'm just going to go through the recommendations first, and then we can discuss the specific responses. The second recommendation was that AHI notes that the draft GFI limits compounding for office stock to a list of substances on the FDA's list of bulk drug substances for compounding office stock drugs for use in non-food producing animals or antidotes for food producing animals. AHI contends that this limitation should be added to the California regulations. Oops. Okay, the next recommendation, which is item B here. AHI states that the proposed regulation refers to but does not define office stock. AHI recommends including a similar definition of office stock in the proposed regulation, and also specifically prohibit the compounding of copies or near copies of FDA-approved products. The next recommendation, letter C here. I'll just say that AHI asserts that a definition of veterinary premise should be included to guard against the establishment of a single-person clinic becoming a front for a commercial compounding operation. The next recommendation, item D here, AHI recommends that the board consider a definition of VCPR specific to compounding to avoid an unintentional expansion of veterinary compounding should the state change the definition of VCPR in the future. Item E, AHI notes that proposed CCR section 2090 subsection A appears to define the type of compounding allowable by federal law under the Animal Medicinal Drug Use Clarification Act. For additional clarity, AHI recommends that for non-sterile compounding, the active ingredients must originate in an FDA-approved veterinary product or products. When approved veterinary products are not available, FDA-approved human products should be used. Additionally, under that same item, AHI contends the regulation should require that bulk active pharmaceutical ingredients be purchased from an FDA-registered facility. Records, including invoices, bills of lading, etc., should be kept to prove the origin of the APIs, and state inspections of veterinary facilities should include inspection of compliance with these requirements. Item F, 2F, as the draft GFI requires reporting of adverse events and establishes a specific form and timeline for doing so, AHI recommends that this requirement also be included in the regulations. So that's a summary of all the recommendations that were provided. Board Council drafted proposed responses to each of those recommendations. And as I mentioned, in addition to these proposed responses, there are some proposed modifications to the language that we are also asking you to consider. And if approved, we would notice those proposed changes for a 15-day public comment period. So if there are any questions, I guess let us know. And again, I might have asked Tara to chime in for additional information if needed.
Have I told you all lately how much I enjoy working on pharmacy regulations? It's so really, it's important, I know, but the good one.
Thank you, Justin. Are there any questions, comments, concerns by board members?
I don't know how that one issue about a single veterinarian hospital can turn into a drug compounding conglomeration or something. Aren't there limits on how much amounts can be compounded, and it has to be specifically for a patient of the hospital?
This is Tara. To address the potential commercialization of a veterinarian compounding drugs for distribution other than to animal patients, we incorporated into a new definition of office stock. So I'm looking at attachment 5 under section 2090, page 2. At the top, new subsection E, office stock means a compounded drug prepared without a patient-specific prescription that may be dispensed only to a client, client's representative, or other veterinarian at the same veterinary premises. So, there's concern that if we're opening up office stock, where potentially at the federal level they wouldn't allow it, but they're not going to enforce it, even though the feds recognize that there is a real need for veterinarian compounding for office stock situations. Primarily, the way it's explained to me, I'm not a veterinarian, that at times you are compounding such small dosages for your animal patients that it's not feasible to compound specifically for just that patient. So at times, and there are other situations, but there's a real need in the veterinary situation for preparations of office stock. However, so the office stock, doesn't come with a specific patient. Well, that's why in here on page 2, we've included the term only. Instead of limiting who you can or who you can't prepare office stock for, we're saying who you can prepare office stock for.
Are you on page 2 of your responses? Is that or page 2 of something else?
I'm looking at page 2 of the modified text. That's
that after the response.
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like when you look at the actual language of the proposal, it becomes a bit more clear than just looking at the responses by themselves. I am looking, however, at the responses to see where that. So yeah. Okay. So the response itself, it's on page 3, item B.
Yes.
Yeah. The board agrees that we should better define office stock and exclude compounded drug preparations to be dispensed or transferred to a distributor, retailer, or veterinarian at another premises. So we're including that in the response to say, yeah, that's not what this is supposed to do. So we're saying our intention here and then following it up with modified text to allow dispensing only to a client's representative, or other veterinarian at the same premises.
And then the actual language is on your proposed regulation, attachment 5.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, Mark, were you finished? I'm sorry.
I'm satisfied.
Okay. Again, I just want to thank Tara and the staff, and I appreciate the AFI thorough review of this. I think that our responses and our moving forward on the compounding regs is sort of in the public protection realm, and I think important because, frankly, the bottom line is the GFI is not final, it's in draft form, and I think that it's important for California to move forward with these thoughtful proposals. And obviously, if at some point in the future there are conflicts with feds, that can be dealt with, I assume. But anyway, I just want to thank the staff and thank Tara for these responses again.
Any other board comments or questions? Moderator, would you please, does anyone want to make a motion on these, or do you want me to open it up for public? I know there are some members of the public, hopefully they're still here, that might have some input on this. So let's go ahead and open it up to public comment, and then we can entertain a motion.
All right, this is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this agenda item, please click on that icon with a question mark within a square located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. Okay, it looks like we do have a couple individuals who have requested public comment. I'll go in the order that requests were received. So our first individual is Grant Miller. Grant, I'm going to be unmuting your microphone now.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to comment. I'd like to thank Tara for her hard work on this very difficult subject. Compounding is a dynamic subject at the moment because there's movement on it, not only at the federal level, but also here at the state level between our Board of Pharmacy, our legislature, and then, of course, our own board. So there's quite a few moving parts, but I feel like the comments submitted by Animal Health Institute, AHI, were very thoughtful, but I do think they were adequately addressed by Tara. I agree with Ms. Bowler that because the draft GFI 256 is just now closing its public comment period, and because they received over 3,000 public comments, it's going to be quite a while before that guidance reaches any kind of permanent format, and I suspect that it will take quite a while, and it may be amended significantly. Its predecessor, GFI 230, which essentially said the same thing that GFI 256 did, was flat out rejected 3 years ago. So I think that waiting for them would be a mistake. I think that it's best to go forward with what we have. I think Tara did a really good job addressing as many of the comments as she could that were set forth by AHI, and I think it strikes a very good balance for now. Like all regulations, they are a living document, they're a work in progress, and we need to start somewhere, and we as practicing veterinarians really need this guidance to tell us how we can do the compounding in practice and under what circumstances. So thank you for the opportunity to comment.
All right, this is the moderator. We will move on to the next individual who has requested public comment. Dick Sullivan, I'll be unmuting your microphone now.
Thank you. Grant pretty much covered everything, especially the hard work that Tara has done on this and communicating back and forth to get the proper intent and to address the current the concerns of AHI. In addition, I would just say that this is so important that once U.S. Pharmacopoeia gets their regulation or their guidelines finished, it automatically becomes law in California. And as veterinarians, we cannot comply with that. We have to have these regulations to allow us to do what we term simple compounding. So this is critical, and this does need to move forward quickly. Thank you very much.
All right, this is the moderator, and it looks like that was the last individual to request public comment. Would you like me to go ahead and close that Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you, and helpful comments. Thank you both, Dr. Miller and Dr. Sullivan. I would like to see if there's someone on the board that would like to entertain a motion on the wording that Tara has come up with and the responses.
Jamie, are we just doing a motion on the responses or and then take the potential revisions to the motion?
Do it all together if we can. Is there a problem with adopting it all together, or do you want us to separate it?
I'll make a motion.
That would be a Tara question.
I think it's cleaner to have two separate motions. So one motion to approve the responses for inclusion in the FSR, and a second motion to approve the modified text with the 15-day public comment period, but reading that whole motion.
Okay, so Kathy, would you like to make?
Sure. So I will make the motion. I guess I'll make the first motion about adopting the board responses that are laid out here. And I don't think we revised or amended any of them. I think that's all I need to say for that motion. Correct, Tara?
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second by another board member?
Since it's a topic so dear to my heart, I will second it.
Thank you, Mark. Any more comments? Do I need to open it again for public comment? I feel like we just did that. You again. Okay, so I need to open it again. Moderator, please open it again for public comment.
All right, this is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I've opened up the Q&A panel for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this motion, please indicate in the Q&A panel. You can access that by clicking the Q&A icon at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And I will pause a moment to allow members of the public time to access that Q&A panel. All right, this is the moderator. It looks like at this time there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to go ahead and close that Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you. Having no public comment, no other hands raised, call for the vote.
Ms. Buller?
Okay.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Dr. Nunez?
Yes.
Ms. Prado?
Yes.
Dr. Salocido?
Yes.
Ms. Yanes is absent. Dr. Nolan?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, so now we would like to entertain another motion that has to do with the modifications that Tara has drafted. Do I hear a motion on those?
I'll motion to adopt those proposed moderations to regulations.
Okay, and do you want to continue with the wording of 15-day period? Tara, you were reading my mind.
I can't quote by heart.
I'll read it for you.
That's nice, thanks.
Okay, so the motion is to approve the proposed modified text for a 15-day comment period, and if there are no adverse comments received during that 15-day public comment period, delegate to the executive officer the authority to adopt the proposed regulatory changes as modified, and also delegate to the executive officer the authority to make any technical or non-substantive changes that may be required in completing the rulemaking file.
Thank you, Tara. So that was your motion, Mark. Was there a second?
I'll second.
Kathy Bowler is seconding. Let me go ahead, and I don't see any more comment from the board. Moderator, please open it up for public comment.
All right, this is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I've opened up the Q&A panel for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment, please click on that Q&A icon at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And I'll pause a moment to allow them adequate time in order to access that Q&A panel. All right, this is the moderator. It looks like there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you. I don't see any further hands raised by the board, so I'd like to go ahead and call for the vote.
Ms. Bowler?
Aye.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Dr. Nunez?
Yes.
Ms. Prado?
Yes.
Dr. Solosino?
Yes.
Ms. Dennis is absent. Dr. Olid?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. I think our last item is going to be recessing till tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. But before I do that, I just want to thank the members of the public for all of their comments and interest in what the board's trying to accomplish here. I know we've had a few fairly controversial and very diverse opinionated issues, and we really appreciate all the input that we've received. And I want to thank you, board members. I know there was a tremendous amount of reading with this. It was a lot to do, and just really want to commend you for the efforts that you've put in this last few months, in fact, this last year. And also welcome again to Dr. Solosito. I hope this wasn't drinking out of a fire hose for you today. Anyway, thank you very much. And with that, I'd like to I'd like to recess till tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Do I need a motion for that, Jessica?
Before we do recess, could I say something? I'm sorry.
Sure.
I just also wanted to thank the staff for the incredible work. This day is a very full day, and working remotely and with the various staff people and with openings in our office, it was incredible the work you put in. But we welcome Dr. Salcido, and I'm so excited about that. But I also thought maybe we should take the opportunity to put on record to thank Dr. Waterhouse just for her tremendous work for this board for the last 8 years. And of course, she was termed out, but she was a president for a couple of terms, I think, and set up our meeting in Fresno, which was the first time I think the vet board had been into the Central Valley, which I think is very important for public input. And I just wanted to thank her. She was a very hardworking board member and a mentor to me. So anyway, I just wanted to get that on the record.
Very well done, Kathy, and I heartily agree with all of your comments. And I kind of was meeting all of the staff, because I'm looking at all your faces, and Justin and Jessica and everyone else. So very well put. Thank you.
And Congratulations, Dr. Solicita, for your first meeting down. Good job. And I just want to say I'm always impressed with Tara's incredible knowledge about, she knows so much detail about all these different topics that we discuss, and she never ceases to amaze me. A terrific mind. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, we will convene then tomorrow at, is it 9 a.m.? Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. See you again tomorrow.